Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Patrick from Dynasty SZN. No Austin today, so it'll be just me. But we're gonna go over all the latest free agency news and just kind of a update on what it has done for fantasy players and whose values really changed the most. Any big winners that we see, and just some players I want to talk about as maybe a go buy candidate and see if you can get them cheap during the off season, especially once we get closer to the draft. If you don't think some of these rookies are going to work out, these are players that you can go get for a third round rookie pick probably very easily, maybe less. Some of these players you may be able to get for fab, who knows. But we'll talk about a few of them and go from there. But we'll start off with some of the news. The biggest news is obviously Matt Ryan to Indianapolis. And as soon as he left Indianapolis, Marcus Mariota signed in Atlanta. Matt Ryan is got 2 years of real guaranteed money, so he's more than likely going to be there the next 2 years. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a Carson Wentz situation where they bring him in and then get rid of him. I don't think Matt Ryan is that quarterback. He had his press conference today and looked real good. Obviously, he looks like that franchise quarterback that he's been for the last however many seasons. He's gonna look good in a press conference, but that's what the Colts needed. They needed somebody who can lead the locker room, and we've heard it, over the last couple of weeks, different stories and rumors about Carson Wentz and his leadership, and so I think Matt Ryan is going to be a good fit in that offense, and I think he's gonna have some weapons with Jonathan Taylor and Pittman that are gonna get some bumps here. I don't know how much of a bump you can give Jonathan Taylor just because he was already your running back one, right? So at this point, he's just staying there. Maybe this gives them more trips to the red zone, more touchdown opportunities. But Jonathan Taylor scored so many touchdowns, I don't think it matters. So really doesn't do much to Jonathan Taylor. But Michael Pittman definitely gets an upgrade. Whoever ends up being the second wide receiver in this is going to get an upgrade. Mo Alley Cox gets an upgrade. Jack Doyle retired, and Mo Alley Cox got re-signed or tendered, so he's going to be there. They also have a young tight end who will be on the roster, so we'll see what happens there. But it's definitely going to be interesting. There's going to be some changes happening in that offense still. They've got to get another weapon to catch the ball. I don't know if it'll be T.Y. Hilton. I don't know if they're going to go with one of the young guys like Patman or Strahan, or however you say his last name, the big Mike. He's like 6'5", 220. So they've got a couple of receivers in there that, Chris Ballard today was talking about wanting to give those guys a shot. They were talking about wanting to give their young tackle a shot after losing Eric Fisher. So they really do build from the draft, and they pay their players, and they haven't gone out and gotten real crazy in free agency. They've made a couple trades, but that's the Colts. They're not real spendy and flashy in free agency, and they pay their own guys when they need to. So it's going to be interesting to see what weapons they bring in opposite of Pittman to help that offense go. I also think that the tight end situation could be underlooked currently, especially with Mo Alley Cox. He was already getting some work out there with Jack Doyle on the roster, but now with Jack Doyle retired, I think he's going to go up in rankings, or once we see him out there with Matt Ryan and or people realize the weapons in this offense, he will go up some rankings. I don't know if he's going to be an every week tight end. I don't know. Probably in that 15 to 20 range. But it is a bump, and I think he will be valuable, at least if he's around the next couple seasons. So we did lose kind of that hope with Donald Parham, who, he was another one of those tight ends that we thought may come into a job with Jared Cook leaving, but now they've got Gerald Everett in there, who looks like he's going to kind of take over that role. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Let's talk a little bit about Mariota to Atlanta. That happened right after Matt Ryan left. Matt Ryan got out of town, and they said, all right, well, come on back, Matt Ryan, who was with Arthur Smith in Tennessee. They also brought back Cordero Patterson, and they signed Damian Williams. They brought back Zacchaeus at wideout, and they have Frank Darby and Kyle Pitts. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. They clearly don't have many weapons. They got a third-round pick for Matt Ryan, which I guess is good if you consider they got a third-round pick for Carson Wentz. So it is what it is. I think the Colts are in position to be legitimate contenders with a competent week-to-week quarterback. Matt Ryan may not be what he was, when he went to the Super Bowl or when he was, on an MVP pace, but I think he's still very talented, and he's one of those guys like Matt Stafford last year. I wanted to see him go get a ring. I would love to see Matt Ryan go get a ring. So we'll see how that works out. I have high hopes, but we got to temper our expectations and wait to see who they bring in. And we got to really see what this offense does with a much more skilled quarterback, in my opinion, than Carson Wentz. Definitely more mature, definitely going to be smarter with the football. So it's going to be interesting to see what they invest in. But Mariota, on the other hand, he needs everything. He's got nothing but Kyle Pitts, really. It's an interesting situation for the Falcons. I don't know if they're going to draft a quarterback this year. They may if Malik Willis falls to him at 8. But currently, the deal they signed Mariota to is really a 1-year bridge deal with a $12 million option for a second year. So if they don't get a quarterback at 8, then they may look to do it next year. Now, depending on where they're at next year and how well Mariota does this year is probably going to depend on that quarterback opportunity to draft very early next year. If they end up not being able to get a high draft pick because Mariota plays them out of it, there's a very real possibility that he gets that option. So even, an extension isn't out of the picture if he plays really well. But they're looking for somebody to lead the Arthur Smith period of this team, and he's familiar with Marcus Mariota. I doubt they're looking at him as a long-term option, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities. He could, when we saw him in Las Vegas, he looked very good in a short period of time, but he never really got an opportunity besides when Ryan Tannehill came and took his job. So he could very well have his own Ryan Tannehill moment here where he goes and gets a job back and plays well enough to keep it. So we'll see what happens. But this does leave a couple quarterbacks left and a couple jobs left. Besides Jimmy G, Baker Mayfield, and maybe Gardner Minshew and a couple other free agent names right now, there really isn't a lot of options for Carolina and Seattle. I don't think Seattle wants to go into the season with Drew Lock as their quarterback. I've been saying it since the trade, but I also don't know how much they're willing to pay for Baker, and I don't think they're getting Jimmy G inside of the division. And I think Jimmy G to Carolina makes the most sense, and Baker to the Seahawks makes the most sense. The quarterback's coach or the offensive coordinator, somebody there in the Carolina building, one of the guys who advocated to bring in Sam Darnold was quoted saying like Baker Mayfield's my 6th QB in this class during that draft. And so I don't think they really are going to bet on Baker after they already did this experiment and dance with Sam Darnold. And I think they want somebody who can lead a team, and they've still got CMC. They just extended DJ Moore. And I think they could use DJ Moore just like Deebo Samuel and bring Jimmy Garoppolo in. And who knows? I just don't know what they're going to do and what their plan is. So we're going to have to see. But I also think that Baker to Seattle makes the most sense. And there was a report today saying like, oh, maybe the Steelers would look at Baker if he was cut. I can't imagine. I know that there's been reports about people not being interested in Baker, and the confirmed mutual disinterest between him and Carolina, which again goes to what I was talking about. So the Baker to Seattle just makes perfect sense, even if it's a quote unquote competition with Drew Lock. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's the most hopeful we would be for DK and Tyler Lockett compared to Drew Lock. I don't think Jimmy is getting traded there inside the division, and I think the odds currently seem like Jimmy might even end up staying on the Niners roster. And I don't know how they're going to backpedal that. I don't know what goes on in Kyle Shanahan's head or building. I never try to make sense of it because it doesn't make sense in the first place. I'm worried about Trey Lance, but the big thing about Jimmy was the shoulder surgery, and that's what threw some of these teams off. They didn't know if he was going to be ready for OTAs, and they, like the Colts specifically, wanted somebody who was going to be ready at OTAs and could be throwing and building rapport with these teammates and chemistry and out there being a leader. So, that was something that Chris Ballard said they were looking for. That was something they wanted, or Frank Reich wanted. So when we look at Jimmy, we got to remember that shoulder surgery, he wasn't allowed to throw for 16 weeks after the surgery. That's a big deal when you're going into a new team as well, and they want to get comfortable with you. And it's just going to be interesting to see what happens with Jimmy. The report of 2 seconds, if they had 2 seconds, I bet you they would have taken it by now. I don't know who's offering them 2 seconds for Jimmy at this point, because the only teams that need quarterbacks are the Panthers and the Seahawks. So Seahawks aren't doing it because they're in the same division. I doubt they're doing it. Maybe it is the Seahawks. Who knows? It could be the Seahawks, and they are not accepting it because they're in the division. But more than likely, they just don't have an offer for 2 seconds. So I have no idea what to expect from those landing spots, but they look like it could happen. We're just gonna have to wait and see. I don't think Carolina is going to go into the season with Sam Darnold as their starter. I expect them to go into camp with either a quarterback or a veteran quarterback, or a rookie quarterback or a veteran quarterback with Sam Darnold there. Whether that's Jimmy G or that's Sam Howell or that's Malik Willis or one of those teams, they were all there at Malik Willis's pro day today. And Malik Willis, he did everything today. Pro days are hard to screw up, but Teddy Bridgewater did it. People can mess up pro days. David Ojabo tore his Achilles, I believe, at his pro day a couple days ago, and that clip was going around of all the coaches just like, yeah, whatever. And it sucks that he probably just, he's probably still not going to fall out of the first round. He might go second, third round, who knows? But he was projected in the middle of the first round and tears his Achilles on his pro day, and everybody just walks away from him. It's just nuts. But these teams were all at the pro days, and we've got Matt Corral's pro day coming up. Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis were yesterday. So we're going to have to keep an eye on who we think is going to draft a quarterback. At this point, I don't think Malik Willis is making it to 6. I think there's a high possibility that the Detroit Lions take him at 2. Even if he doesn't play this year, even if he's in a competition with Goff or whatever they want to do there, I think it is highly possible that they draft Malik Willis at 2 if Aiden Hutchinson goes 1 overall. The biggest thing we're going to have to keep an eye on is if they don't take him at 2, are they willing to trade down because they have the 32nd pick? Because the rumor has been that they want Aiden Hutchinson. And so Aiden Hutchinson now looks like he's going to go 1st overall to the Jaguars because they franchise tagged their tackle. They're no longer looking like they're going to take Evan Neal 1st overall. And there was the slight chance Icky was up there, but it's really looking like Aiden Hutchinson is going to be the first player off the board in the NFL draft. And there's a high probability that Malik Willis goes 2. If he doesn't and they go Kyle Hamilton, or they look to trade down because Aiden Hutchinson's not there, one of these teams could very likely jump up to 2 and take Malik Willis. Whether that's the Falcons, who are down at 8, if they want to go up, and skip the Panthers because the Panthers are at 6, or if they don't do it, then we've got Carolina, who's probably going to want the pick at 6, but Washington, who may want to jump Carolina and Atlanta. So there's even the Steelers down at 20, like, may want to come up to try and get Malik Willis. The teams are falling in love with Malik Willis. Analysts are falling in love with Malik Willis. I'm falling in love with Malik Willis. So I think there is a very high probability of him going to overall. It's the current favorite on, I think, FanDuel for him to go second. Tied, I believe, with Kyle Hamilton. So there is a lot that's going on in the draft as well with these pro days happening. We saw some interesting 40 times out of Texas A&M affecting Isaiah Spiller. Isaiah Spiller did not run at the combine. He did improve his vertical jump by 3 inches at the pro day. And, that one's, it's not like it's hand timers. So I can feel pretty confident in that one. He did say, I believe it was an oblique muscle or something at the combine. So he did improve that by 3 inches. He ran like a 4.63 or something. It was not very good. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Isaiah Spiller. Isaiah Spiller has the potential to fall down draft boards right now. He's definitely behind Kenneth Walker, and we, as fantasy, we want Kenneth Walker to catch passes, which we haven't seen him do, and he's still going up above Isaiah Spiller right now, just because of what we expect the draft capital to be. Kenneth Walker could be the first running back off the board, even if he doesn't catch passes in college. He could still be the first running back off the board ahead of Breece Hall. It is not out of the realm of possibilities. So Isaiah Spiller is definitely taking a hit, and I really don't want to penalize him too much because I really like him on tape. His tape grade is still very high for me, but the metrics and the burst score and stuff is kind of going down. The burst really isn't there, whereas we saw it with Breece Hall. We know Kenneth Walker has that speed. So I'm very scared. I would rather at this point, like, if I, just off of film and my film grades, he was higher. But right now I have Brian Robinson very high. I have Hassan Haskins very high. And these are guys that are going to get later picks. And I think I may be happier taking the later draft capital, my rookie draft, on some of those shots, depending on where they land, than I would investing high draft capital in Isaiah Spiller right now. It's definitely going to be a rough sort of fall for Isaiah Spiller. I have no idea where he's going to end up. We could be looking at him falling late third, fourth round. So I have no idea what to expect at this point. He may not even be the third running back. So we'll just have to wait and see. I think that let's talk about a couple IDP players who may be at the top of your rookie drafts if you're playing Dynasty with IDP. Some of those are going to be your top linebackers with, Devin Lloyd. You've got Devin Lloyd. You have Brian Asamoah. You have here, let me just pull up my list here. If you want to see this list, you can go pull it up on Patreon. It is listed for free for everybody on Patreon. If you go there, it should give you my link to my Draft Network big board. That big board has all of my rankings for my Dynasty rookies all together. That's even linebackers, safeties, defensive linemen, edge rushers. They're all in there. This is a pre-draft ranking based off of like tape grades and expected draft capital. So I will be doing a brand new list and be posting it for patrons only once we get past the draft. Once we get past the draft, my rookie rankings will be for patrons only. We'll do some videos highlighting them, but only the patrons are going to get that full list with IDP. We will get some tier videos, but that full list will be patrons only this year. But right now, my first defensive player I have on my rankings is in the first round. So I have 2 defensive players right on the bubble of the first round. This is all tentative to change based on landing spots, but it's Nakobe Dean, and he's the linebacker out of Georgia. There's 2 linebackers coming out of Georgia this year who are supposed to be very good. They are getting mocked a lot of times to the Eagles in the middle of the first round. They do very much need a linebacker in the middle next to TJ Edwards. They lost Alex Singleton, which isn't a huge loss. He was just kind of the guy there playing. So if we can get them to draft a linebacker, it's going to be a no-brainer. If they take a first-round linebacker, one of these top linebacker prospects, whether it's Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd, I'm in. I will take them probably right after like the Drake London group of wide receivers. Probably right before Chris Olave and Jamison Williams. So I have a few guys up there in front of him. I even have George Pickens right in front of him right now. But Drake London, George Pickens, Matt Corral, Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller is still up here. I haven't really dropped him at this point. Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, just those guys that we know that are going to be in the first round of our rookie drafts. Those guys are in the front. But I do have Nakobe Dean at 11, and I'm probably going to move him up to 10 after I make this video. I have Kyle Hamilton at 14, Devin Lloyd at 15. So if Kyle Hamilton goes 2 overall and he looks like he's going to start every game and be the guy that the Lions can bring down in the box, like he's going to be a first round pick. He will move up into my first round. The same thing goes with Devin Lloyd. If Devin Lloyd goes to a killer spot in the first round where we expect him to start right away, be Micah Parsons, then I'm in. Maybe not rush the passer, but be that starting rookie impact linebacker. That's what we're looking for in first round linebackers. Same thing we're looking for in wide receivers, running backs. Those are the guys, the impact players you expect to help your team this year, or it's a quarterback that may sit a year and they're going to be good. Something like that. Just those top tier prospects. But once we get out of like the first round, I don't know if I expect Aiden Hutchinson to be anywhere in the conversation. To me, he's more of like a mid-second round rookie pick just because of the way the defensive end or the D-line position in fantasy really kind of struggles, and there's already a ton of players. I'm working on my IDP rankings right now, which will be up on Patreon as soon as I finish them. The link is already up there. You can even see it while I tinker with it. But my offensive rankings are done and up there. IDP is being finished right now. So once it is done, I will let you guys know. But I don't know how much value I'm putting on the edge rushers in this class. There is a lot of them, and they are very good. We could have 3 in the top 10, 4 in the top 10. Trayvon Walker, George Karlaftis has dropped down a bunch of rankings. He's, in mocks available late first round. So I think if Thibodeau falls and Trayvon Walker goes real early, we could see Aiden Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker go in the first half of the second round of rookie drafts. But to me, I'm still taking them in the second half of the first round. I think everybody after that, outside of probably top 15 picks with Thibodeau and maybe Jermaine Johnson is in there. Just depends on where they get that draft capital and where they end up, what their competition looks like. They'll probably end up beginning of the third round to end of your rookie drafts falling in there places. Just because there's probably only going to be 6 or 7 in this draft that end up on fantasy teams. People may grab a guy they like and stash him on taxi post the rookie draft, but there's a lot of wide receivers and a lot of depth running backs. There's some good linebackers and about 5 safeties I'm really interested in right now. There's also 3 or 4 tight ends I'm looking at in this rookie draft. None are Pat Fryermuth, but a couple are close. And I think the biggest thing about these linebackers is, we just got to look at draft capital. And that doesn't always mean they're going to be first year impact players. Took Zaven Collins last year in the beginning of the second round. He was one of the first linebackers taken in our rookie draft. He was in that range with Zaven Collins, Jamin Davis, Nick Bolton, those types of guys in there. JOK. So all of those guys, Nick Bolton had the biggest first year impact, which wouldn't have been my guess. But next year he's looking like he's going to be the every down player next to Willie Gay. Same thing with Zaven Collins. There was rumors. The reason I took him so early is because they were talking about sending Jordan Hicks out of town, which he's gone now. He was the guy preventing Zaven Collins from playing every down next to Simmons. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but we got to play these rookies off their draft capital and understand that sometimes it may not work out the first year. Not every linebacker is going to be Micah Parsons, but we do want that with a linebacker going to the Eagles in the middle of the first round. There are other teams that really need linebackers still. Some of them have shored up that need in free agency, but they're the Falcons. If they want to go with Michael Walker next to Deion Jones, they can, but I don't know if they will. They could bring somebody in. There's also the Cowboys. They re-signed Leighton Vander Esch. They did attack the edge position a little bit in free agency. So I don't know how much it's going to affect Micah Parsons in that pass rush role yet. I do believe they want to get him more back to a primary linebacker next to Micah Parsons, because they aren't bringing Keanu Neal back, it doesn't look like, because he wants to play safety. But they did bring back Jaron Curse, which is a big one because he was a top 12 DB last year. So they've also brought back Amani Hooker. No, Amani Hooker is in Tennessee. Malik Hooker. So they did bring him back as well. And it looks like KZ, and I don't know if Donovan Wilson is even still on the team. So they're kind of filling that roster out a little bit. Not great, but there is linebacker availability for like a third role, or if Micah Parsons does end up playing that like sub rush package on nickel, we could see Leighton Vander Esch and whoever they bring in still be that nickel down guy. So nickel package guy. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, but they could draft a linebacker, or they could go with like a Jabril Cox, and he could be the sub out guy. He could be the 4-3 package, and Micah Parsons stays at the traditional linebacker position. So that's something we're going to have to keep our eye on as things unfold, is how these guys are used as the rosters change. But the next linebacker is I have on here is the other Georgia linebacker is Quay Walker, and he should be going very early, along with Brian Asamoah. He's from Oklahoma. He's been mocked in the first round to different teams. Leo Chanel, he is one of those Anthony Walker types, that downhill run stuffer linebacker who is probably going to be rotated out on third downs or nickel packages in passing situations whenever they go down to two linebackers. He's just doesn't have the pass coverage. It's not saying that he can't be used that way or won't. I'm just saying it's probably not in his skill set at the moment. The other one, kind of similar, is out of Alabama. It is Christian Harris. Christian Harris is a little bit more of an all-around linebacker. Not bad, but it's all going to depend on if he gets any draft capital and has a path to snaps, because that's the first thing you need on defense, is the majority of snaps. So we'll see where it goes. But I don't even have I have, after the top 2-3 edge rushers, I don't have any more in my top 2 rounds. I have one in the third round. So it gets thin real quick after that with the edge rushers. Linebackers kind of trickle through. Again, some of those guys can be pushed up with draft capital and opportunity that we think they may have. Some of them may fall in the draft and become not a target for fantasy IDP. You know, it could be somebody that maybe you stash on a taxi squad because they're behind a guy who's on the last year of his deal and you think he's going to take his job. You know, something like that. But you can't guarantee some of these guys starting roles, and even if they get a starting role, it may be in a sub role where they come out in nickel. So you got to be prepared for these guys to take a year to really learn the defense and get comfortable and be an every down player, especially with D linemen too. That's the thing about these D linemen and tight ends. They take a little while to develop, and you want to be able to give them that time and stash them on your taxi squad. And then once you start seeing them break out, you can be like, oh, well, how set am I at this position? If I have a stud defensive lineman that I drafted in the second round who's been sitting on my taxi squad, if I pull him up and he's not ready to play every week, I'm stuck with him on my roster. Or I'm trying to trade him based off of the draft capital that was used on him. So you really want to wait and see that those players are ready. Defensive line just becomes so dependent on your tackles and your tackles for a loss and sacks that if you're not playing half the snaps, or if you're only playing half the snaps, your upside is limited, your floor is limited. You know, you're really just dependent on, did I get a sack and did I kill my team or not? So you got to wait for them to develop. And Gregory Rousseau last year, probably not somebody I was trusting every game. But this going into this next season, he looks like somebody that, especially opposite of Von Miller, I'm interested in. So there is opportunities to be found at defensive line when you just stash some of these high-level prospects on your taxi squad. Even if you don't need a defensive lineman. I don't need a defensive lineman, but I also am not going to be drafting a defensive lineman. When it comes to, you know, my IDP roster, I try to make sure I'm not stashing my bench with a bunch of maybe IDP players. I want studs. I want players that I could play any week on my bench in IDP because there's that many available. There's no reason to have somebody that has no viable playability on your bench. The only time you should have those players on your team is when they are on your taxi squad when it comes to IDP. There is always a DB. There's always a DB out there that you can pick up. Even some corners, which I'm very against corners, but there are some corners out there that you can pick up that can play on your team any week. So it doesn't make sense to hold on to a Ronnie Harrison who just never seems to pan out or be healthy, even though you had hype for him as a young player in Cleveland who looked like he was going to have a Xavier McKinney style breakout, which he didn't get at safety. So like now you've seen the Giants move on from Logan Ryan and Xavier McKinney, and looks like maybe they're going to bring back Jabril Peppers, which would be cool. But you got to sometimes wait for the defensive opportunity, and you got to wait for their coaches to really get some trust in them. And that's why you don't see these defensive players going in the top half of the first round, because you could take a linebacker at the end of the first round and he could still take a whole year to get every down work. So IDP and rookie drafts can really get pushed back, especially with people not understanding the value or not seeing the instant impact on a team. But if you drafted Zaven Collins like I did, I ended up being able to trade him to somebody who, you know, was interested in what he was going to be this year for a player that I needed to try and make a playoff push. Didn't end up working. It was Myles Gaskin, who then went on the COVID list and then didn't get his job back to Duke Johnson. But, you know, it was it was like 204, I think, that I would have technically traded for Myles Gaskin in 401. So those are the types of moves that you can make with defensive players if you've already got studs, and he didn't end up working out. Zaven Collins I had on my bench, and he was clogging a roster spot because I thought I was hoping they were going to get rid of Jordan Hicks. and I read too much into it, left him on my bench, didn't put him on the taxi squad. If I had had him on my taxi squad, I probably wouldn't have traded him for Myles Gaskin. But that bench slot was that valuable when I was trying to make a playoff push. I couldn't have somebody there who wasn't going to be able to play on my team. So that you have to keep that in mind when you are looking at IDP players. I don't know if there's any more big IDP targets on here. Jordan Davis, the big interior defensive lineman from Georgia who shocked everybody with his fast 40 time, he's on my list. If I can get him in the last round of my rookie draft, I will take him if nobody's taking him, because he's just a freak athlete. And if he's the next Aaron Donald, I want him on my team. Aaron Donald was, I think, the second best defensive line player last year. He played almost 1,000 snaps, which for defensive linemen is insane. And his tackle numbers with his sacks just makes him phenomenal because he's playing all those downs. So if we can get that out of Jordan Davis, I'd be so excited. So definitely something to think about. Let's see. Let's talk about the safeties a little bit behind Kyle Hamilton. I haven't done enough research on some of these, on like Jaquan Brisker. I haven't done enough looking into, and Jalen Petrie out of Baylor. I don't know enough, but I can say a little bit about Daxton Hill. Daxton Hill has been mocked at the end of the first round. They're really thinking he's going to be end of the first round, early second round talent. It's really going to be what team wants to draft a safety, and there's going to be a big drop off from Kyle Hamilton. So there's still the possibility Kyle Hamilton plummets to pick 10. There's still a possibility that these running backs don't go until the third, fourth round. We don't see any in the second round. So we got to keep that in mind. We're talking about realm of possibilities and probable outcomes. So we can't really say with any certainty until we see where they go and what their draft capital is. So all we can do is judge the prospects right now and where they're expected to go. And Daxton Hill is getting very good draft capital in a lot of mock drafts, early second, late first. I saw him a lot to the Chiefs, but that was prior to them signing Reed to like a 3-year deal. So I don't know if they are still in the market for a safety. They may be, with Sorensen was playing for them at some points. He got benched, then came back. So maybe they still have a desire to bring somebody in at safety, but I don't know. They're obviously letting Honey Badger walk, so I'm not sure what they're fully going to do. They still could draft a safety, but I don't know if it'll be the first round. I think they're really going to look at getting a big second wide receiver so that they can have Juju in the slot and still have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. I don't know if they really want to invest that early just because of how much production can they get. They still have Mecole Hardman. They still have, people there. So it's going to be interesting. Another free agent signing that we can discuss a little bit is Jamison Crowder going to the Buffalo Bills to take over the Cole Beasley style role. He did get $4 million. It is more. It's like double what Isaiah McKenzie got, who was going to be in that role. So Isaiah McKenzie probably takes a hit where, the last couple of days he was kind of looking a little spicy. But there's a lot of available targets there. There is lots of room in that offense to score touchdowns. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. Cole Beasley is gone. It's like 193 targets that are gone from that offense. So lots of opportunities available. Gabriel Davis, we assume to get some of those. Tristan McKenzie, we still assume to get some of those. But Tristan McKenzie has made his biggest impacts in like one single game sample at a time. And so we'll have to see what happens from there. The other thing we can look into is, let me pull up my stats here, and then we can go over some available targets and what that really means. So the available targets that I'm looking at are from players that left in free agency or have been traded. And the teams at the top are the Cardinals, because believe it or not, with Christian Kirk going out of the building, he had 103 targets, the most on the team, which I didn't realize until I started looking at these. But if you also look at Chase Edmonds, AJ Green and Christian Kirk were the top 2 target getters on that team, counting for 195 targets. Now we expect DeAndre Hopkins to be healthy and play more than he did last year, because last year he only got to play in 10 games. Zach Ertz is going to get a full season, but I think Rondale Moore is definitely going to get a jump from this. The other person who they re-signed is Antoine Wesley. I don't know how much stock to put into it, but there's a lot of targets available. There's 8 touchdowns available, 8 receiving touchdowns, and that is with James Conner scoring a lot of rushing touchdowns, so who knows, we could see more. The opportunities available and them bringing back Antoine Wesley may be worth a second look. I haven't done enough looking into him to see how much I would invest in him. I mean, it's a free pickup. If you've got a bench spot, maybe grab him, throw him in there for the offseason. If they draft a wide receiver, they bring in another name, you can get rid of him. But, Rondale Moore is already rostered. DeAndre Hopkins is already rostered. There's not a lot of opportunities for us to go get. Austin mentioned the other day, Zach Ertz being a sleeper. If you can trade for him and get him at cheap value, do it. But I don't know if that owner is getting rid of him with how he finished this season. We'll have to see. But like I said, I thought he was too high of a ranked player to really list as a sleeper. And then Austin showed where he was, and I said, okay, yeah, I guess this does count. The other big teams with receiving opportunities, these are going to be very obvious, and we know that they have opportunities. One of them has probably already been half addressed in Cleveland with Amari Cooper, but the other is the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers have Allen Lazard, and that's about it. They got Amari Rodgers. I have no clue what they're going to do. There's been rumors of Jarvis Landry and OBJ reuniting there. We have no idea what's going to happen. There was rumors of OBJ going to Indy after he tweeted about Matt Ryan going to the Colts being a real smart move. And so I don't know what to expect for these buildings, but Deshaun Watson is going to up the passing volume. It definitely helps David Njoku with the amount of targets available, 229 in Cleveland. And these are off of my numbers that I've extracted from Sports Reference and put into my own database. So I can't say they are 100% accurate, but they are close enough to where I can still gauge it off of a estimated number, even if there may be a slight margin of error. I can't always guarantee that every single reception and target is in here. I do have the ability to filter it over a certain amount, which I do when I'm trying to find those diamonds in the rough. I want to meet certain criterias of minimum targets or receptions. But it does even have some offensive linemen in here who have caught touchdowns. So there is a lot of information. This is one of those things that if you have my $5 Patreon, you can look at this. You can see this. It is going to be posted on Patreon. But Cleveland Browns, 229 targets available. Green Bay Packers, 241. So we know they're going to need receivers. If Cleveland doesn't bring a guy, Donovan Peoples-Jones goes through the roof. We talked about it, but we expect them to bring in a guy. The next one, Chicago Bears. So Chicago Bears gave a lot of targets to Darnell Mooney, 140 of them. Allen Robinson, 66. Marquise Goodwin, 38. Maybe that's Demario Byrd. Marquise Goodwin, 40. And, these guys are all gone. Jimmy Graham, Jakeem Grant, Damian Williams, Jesse James, all these guys gone. 213 targets. So whoever ends up, whether it's Byron Pringle or Equanimous St. Brown or whoever is going to be that guy outside opposite of Darnell Mooney, is going to have the ability to catch some passes. This may boost my Cole Kmet view a little bit just because of how many targets are going to be available. I really want to see Justin Fields take the next step, but I'm worried it may be a year off just because of the rebuild of the whole organization with new GM, new head coach. They're clearly building it how they want it built, getting rid of some of those players and cap hits that are hurting them from doing that with it, like Khalil Mack and things like that. So it's going to be, we're going to have to judge it on how much they commit this year. And I feel like they need to because they have a rookie quarterback, and the formula for winning, it seems to be either bring in a veteran quarterback who needs us to do some salary cap magic around him so that we can sign players who want to go try and win a championship, or it's draft a young rookie stud quarterback, and while they're on the rookie contract being paid pennies, invest in all the other positions. So they're on year 2 of Justin Fields, and they've got to do they got to start investing in some positions. And they're not paying any big wide receivers. They are on the last year of David Montgomery's contract. They still have Khalil Herbert, so if they did move on, it wouldn't be the end of the world. We saw Khalil Herbert. Tariq Cohen is gone. They need weapons in Chicago. If they get a big name signing that's not Equanimeous St. Brown or something like that, they should be valuable. We need them to do that. If they draft a wide receiver, I'm going to maybe take a shot if it's one of those higher ranked prospects. But it also depends on how much draft capital is used. I don't know how much draft capital they have after trading up for Fields. Didn't they trade up for Fields last year? Is that why the Giants have 2 picks? I believe it is, but I cannot remember off the top of my head, so I would have to verify that. But the next team, Jacksonville, 202 available targets. They did bring in Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. They brought in a lot of guys. They have so many wide receivers. It's like the Rams last year where they had brought in Tutu Atwell and all, like, drafted these guys. I'm like, why? What are they going to do with them all? That's how I feel about Jacksonville right now. As somebody who has LaVisca in a couple leagues, it's sad because, if LaVisca doesn't get traded, it kind of kills the LaVisca dream, but it'll be interesting. Also, one last thing about Chicago, if Byron Pringle gets the slot job, he could be worth taking a look at. If he could be on waivers in your Dynasty League. I went and checked. He was already owned in mine, but he's one of those fringe players who may or may not be on a roster. If you're offensive-only league, he's probably on a roster just because of, you have defensive players take up bench spots as well. Next is the Dallas Cowboys, and I've talked about James Washington. I even tweeted about James Washington, which, by the way, if you have not, make sure you go check out Twitter, because the pinned tweet on my Twitter at Heart Sports Talk is a giveaway for a NFL Shop gift card. It'll be going in April, and as soon as that finishes, I will announce the winner on Twitter so that we can get you that $20 NFL Shop gift card. Get ready for draft and NFL season. So the Dallas Cowboys, I've talked about it already, but James Washington could have a huge role. I'm not saying James Washington is an incredible wide receiver, but there are 198 targets available and 19 receiving touchdowns. 19 receiving touchdowns no longer accounted for in the receiving core of the Dallas Cowboys. Those numbers are not going to go away. Ezekiel Elliott still rushed for 10 touchdowns. We are talking about a top 6, top 5 offense in the NFL. If James Washington is available, or you can get him for a 4th or 5th round pick, go do it right now. 198 targets, 19 touchdowns available. Michael Gallup could miss the first 6 weeks if he's on PUP. If he misses the first 6 weeks, currently James Washington would be the wide receiver 2 opposite of CeeDee Lamb, followed by Noah Brown, who Noah Brown I don't have anything against. I think he's a great player. He's probably similar in regard to James Washington, but he's probably going to be below him on the depth chart unless they just go with him because he knows the offense. Not out of the realm of possibilities, but even then, I'm interested in James Washington. It's only a 1-year deal, so in Dynasty, this could be a player that you're looking to grab, get immense value out of the first half, and try and sell him. Or you can just realize that he could be playing in that third role in a high-powered offense that he's still going to be a valuable flex play on your roster, even if you're not going to get the wide receiver 2 numbers you were getting out of him with Michael Gallup out of the way. So you just got to remember that offense supported like multiple 800-yard plus or 700-yard plus wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz, and then Michael Gallup got hurt. But he was looking good too. So, Michael Gallup only had 445 receiving yards. Cedric Wilson had 602 when he was playing in replace of Michael Gallup, who only played 9 games. Michael Gallup, 9 games, 445 yards. Cedric Wilson, 14 games, 602 yards. Everybody else, Dalton Schultz, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, 1,102 yards. Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz, over 800 yards. There is so much receiving volume to go around that James Washington has to be fantasy relevant. He has to be. There is no way he's not. So, James Washington, one of my biggest ones right now. I will mention one other that I think is in a very similar position with an upgraded offense who may not have... He may not keep this role, but just a guy to keep an eye on for now. If you had somebody who may have lost a opportunity because of a free agent signing, this is another one of those flyer guys that you can just drop the one that didn't work out, move on to the next one. Drop your Nick Westbrook-Akine because they brought in Robert Woods and go get this guy in Jakeem Grant. Okay, especially if your league like ours gives points for returns. Our league is 10 yards per 1 point on punt returns and 25 yards per 1 point on kick returns. That gives some of these return specialists who catch a couple passes and get the PPR points valuable flex play. There was a time period last season where Chester Rogers, he could have been a flex spot in your lineup, but he was only catching a couple passes every week. It was just the return work he was getting. Jabril Peppers, a safety, getting punt returns, getting some kick returns. Those guys are getting extra points. Mecole Hardman, Mecole Hardman in standard PPR, you may be a little worried. He may not even be a flex play. He gets that little bump from returning that really puts him, worst case 7 points. He catches a couple passes, 20 yards and 3 returns for another couple points. And worst case, he gets you 7 points, Same thing with Jakeem Grant. So, Jakeem Grant goes to Cleveland, gonna play that slot role more than likely. I think he earned the playing time with his time in Chicago after leaving Miami, and he's definitely gonna return kicks. He's got to. He was a return specialist, so I think he could be good there if they don't bring in a receiver. But again, this is one of those guys that you're paying nothing for if he's out there to stash him for a little bit and see what happens. Let's take a look at a couple other teams here. Let's see what we can find. Kansas City and New York Giants. They both have 176 targets available. They have brought in Juju, so Casey does have some more targets, but they've lost Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, Marcus Kemp, who only had 2 catches last year, 10. How many targets? 5 targets on 2 catches on 5 targets. So they lost a few people, but no huge name. The big one was Darrell Williams not being there and Byron Pringle. Those guys caught a lot of passes, 117 or 107 of them, 117 of them. Excuse me. So those guys leave some opportunity. We hope that CEH steps into some of those pass catching opportunities at the running back position, but we'll have to see. Pittsburgh, 156 targets available, only 3 touchdowns available. They're really only losing Juju, who missed a lot of the season, and James Washington. So they're missing some pieces, and Eric Ebron. So that's why we're not seeing a lot of touchdowns available, is because they still have Deontay and Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth, who is a big red zone weapon. Tampa Bay, they, I'm expecting them to get Gronk back, but if they don't, it will be interesting to see what their tight end position does, because they have 209 available targets at the moment, and Antonio Brown was getting a lot of air yards. He only played in 7 games. He has 727 air yards. So he was very involved. To put that in perspective, let's see here. Who played 16 games? Mike Evans, 16 games. He had 1472. So he was matching Mike Evans, who we view as this, touchdown out at perimeter wide receiver. He was the same similar pace as him over 16 games. He would have been ahead of Mike Evans in air yards. So Russell Gage has an opportunity to succeed here. If Tom Brady personally recruited him, go get him. This is a guy you can probably spend a fourth, maybe a third. I spent $302 in our league on him, and I was happy about it. So if you can get him, it's the same situation as James Washington at a little bit higher price tag. He did, get a little bit more money. He had a better year last year. But the thing you have to remember is Tom Brady's still going to be gone at some point. And so when Tom Brady leaves, you're still going to wonder who's throwing Russell Gage the ball, and he's still behind Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So keep that in mind when you go out and get Russell Gage, that you are doing this for the short-term investment. You are doing this because he should have a good start of the year, especially if Chris Godwin misses time. Then he steps into that number 2 role, just like we were talking about with James Washington. The opportunities will be there, and I think that the Tampa Bay offense is still going to be a very high-powered passing offense. They brought back Leonard Fournette. He's going to catch plenty of passes. So I have to check and make sure his numbers aren't in this. It looks like they may be at the moment. So let's just go ahead and remove that right now and see what it goes to. From 209, it goes down to 125. So that is a much more realistic number because Lenny was taking a lot of those. So we will go over let's go over one more before we get out of here. But I want to tell you guys all about some of the cool Patreon content we got coming your way. Let's look at some teams who don't have opportunities available. And that's the Miami Dolphins. So they only had 81 targets available with the people who left their team. They brought in a few people. Brought in Juwan Jennings. They brought in Cedric Wilson. They still have Preston Williams. That they really only lost Will Fuller, who didn't play a lot for them. They lost Albert Wilson and Mac Hollins. So the targets that they're losing are very limited. The amount of time that we're going to wonder which wide receiver is going to be on the field, like we did, is with San Francisco, is probably going to be higher this year for the Dolphins, because I don't know which wide receivers they're going to use. And Juwan Jennings came with Mike McDaniel from San Francisco, and I just don't know what to expect. So it does get a little scary with them not having much targets available. Seattle doesn't have a lot of targets available, but they didn't really change anything. All they really lost was Gerald Everett, but they gained Noah Fant. So don't really expect anything there. New England, not a lot's changing. Baltimore, not a lot's changing. Carolina, not a lot's changing. The biggest thing in Carolina is Brandon Zylstra, who is gone, who was getting some work over Terrace Marshall after he got a concussion. Terrace Marshall was never able to get back on the field, even though we were excited about him to start the year and what he was being used as. And then the offensive coordinator gets fired, which was the main reason I was super high on him. and now we got to see what happens. But him being gone could open up a avenue for Terrace Marshall to get back on the field. We still don't know who's going to be playing quarterback for him, but it is an opportunity. And then Detroit added wide receivers and did not really get rid of anybody. They still have TJ Hawkinson, who missed a bunch of time. They still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's supposed to get a lot of targets. They re-signed Josh Reynolds. They still have DeAndre Swift. They still have Jamal Williams, who missed time with injury. Kadarius Hodge is gone. But I don't want any of these guys. Like, I know Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be valuable, but is he going to be valuable enough for me to keep him, or do I want to trade him at his current value? It's really going to depend on if they draft Malik Willis. If they draft Malik Willis, I'm going to bet on Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I'm going to keep him. I'm going to hang out. I'm going to see what happens. I know he's not the deep threat, which we are going to want with Malik Willis, but it may take a year for him to get on the field. We are going to have to wait and see. But there is a high possibility he goes at 2, and I think it would be an upgrade for some of the receiving options in Detroit, specifically DJ Chark on the 1-year deal. If we do get to see him, it could happen quickly. The last one I will talk about here is Philadelphia. Philadelphia is actually last in my available targets at 31. I'm going to have to double check this because that just seems like it's too low. They lost Zach Ertz middle of the year last year, but they still have Dallas Goedert, so those really get absorbed. And Jalen Reagor worthless, Quez Watkins worthless, Devonta Smith you want on your team, but you're hoping to see an upgrade in the passing game. We'll just have to see what happens. But otherwise, I don't really think there's another player I want to get into right now. So let me tell you guys all about the rookie prospect videos I'm putting out on Patreon. I did the Breece Hall one. It is up now. I did it before the Pro Day, so it doesn't have any updated Pro Day information. I may put out a new one right before the draft, but we shall see. Some of these other ones that are going to be coming out this week are going to have some more Pro Day information, and we're going to fly through the running backs. I'm going to knock out 2 or 3 of them this next couple days, and as soon as they're done being edited, they will go up on Patreon. Excuse me. So I'll do Kenneth Walker and Isaiah Spiller in the next day or two and get them up on Patreon. Again, on Patreon is my rookie big board. It is my pre-draft big board. My post-draft big board will be to patrons only. Also, if you want to get into the Discord, send in your trades, send in your IDP questions, your start sits once we get into the season. It's all going to be done in Discord for our patrons. So Austin's not here today, but he'd tell you all about it too. Make sure you guys get to that Twitter page at Heart Sports Talk and enter the giveaway for a $20 NFL shop gift card. That'll be emailed to you once we do the drawing in April. You can see how long is left and the ways to enter on Twitter and check it out. We will be back on Friday with the next episode. We may do a mock draft. We'll have to see what happens. I wanted to get a mock draft done today, but unfortunately Austin was not feeling it after being up way too late, so we will try to do one on Friday. See if I can get a couple guys from our current league and see if they want to do some sort of IDP startup sort of draft so that we can see what's going on. I'll see if I can get a friend of mine who is currently doing a startup draft with IDP to send me his whole board, and maybe we can just talk about it and go from there. So we will discuss a startup with IDP involved on Friday, in some sort of fashion. So be ready for that as the IDP/mock draft show for the week. Sign up on Twitter or enter the giveaway on Twitter. Follow at Heart Sports Talk. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, anything there. Leave a review, like the video on YouTube, and we will see you on Friday.